Okay. In the future, someone's going to have to help me remember to record. I put it all over the source sheets. All right, we're recording now. For those of you who are just joining us from the recording, we were just talking about practices of hitbodedut. Many people shared what their experience is, and we're going to engage with talking about obstacles to hitbodedut after we look at our prayer hero of the week, who is, drumroll, Hagar. For those of you who looked at the sheet, you knew this big reveal already, but I'm so excited. It's just great to be able to spend time with these fantastic characters. And so we're going to get to spend a little time with today's prayer hero, Hagar. And as is true from last week, the framing again was looking at characters who cry out to God, who have this one-on-one vocal relationship with the divine in our tradition as inspiration and elucidation of what it might mean for us to do the same. So that's sort of the method behind the madness. So I want to actually discuss, just for a moment, sort of introduce Hagar as a character. So Hagar, of course, is the second wife of Abraham. And she, as we'll see in today's reading, is a servant of the family. She seems to be specifically Sarah's servant. And Sarah, after decades of infertility, decides to try something new and gain a son with Abraham through Hagar. And this leads to all kinds of trouble that we will read about today. And the two things I just want to say, because they seem relevant to what we're going to be reading in Chavruta, is one, she actually is, Hagar is the first woman who is spoken to directly in the Torah. The first woman who is addressed directly by the divine. Now it's true, this is a malach. It's an angel of God. But that seems relevant to our purposes. And the second thing I want to say, which also feels relevant, is that you'll notice in Chavruta, when you look at the text, she doesn't speak much. She doesn't have a lot of lines of dialogue, right? And I've actually bolded the places where she speaks. So those are going to be the places that we're going to really want to focus some of our attention. All right, so I'm hoping that we're going to have a little more time for Chavruta this time. So I'm going to once again, just for anyone who doesn't have it, I'm going to add in the chat the Google Doc. Does everybody have access to the sources?
Yes.
Yeah, because I can also give you, if people need to look in there, for this one, looking in your Chumash will be fine, because everything we're looking at is together in the Chumash. We're looking at Genesis chapter 16, 1 through 15.
What page?
In the I don't have it with me, so I'm not sure.
Genesis
16,
after
1 through 15.
Okay.
It should be in Lech Lecha, in Parshat Lech Lecha, if that's helpful. Actually, it's in Vayera. Yeah. Okay. And so I'm going to put you into breakout rooms. The other thing I'm going to add into the chat, I think the Chavruta questions didn't make it in to the sheet when I first sent it out. They're there now, and I just put them in the chat. But I also want to say it doesn't really matter what my questions are. Wherever your conversation as a chavruta goes, whatever your questions are, that's what should lead your chavruta. These questions are just sort of to help you pique your curiosity about some things. So I'll just read them. Always, what are your questions? When does Hagar speak to God? What's the situation? How does she speak to God? What are the words? What does that look like? And then you'll notice that some of her words are interpreted right after she says them. She says them, and then the Torah tells us what they mean. Okay? And so I'm really interested, I'll just tell you from the beginning, I'm really interested in that space between she says what she says, and then we hear what she says. You know, we hear an interpretation of what she says. So what do you think the words mean?
Okay. Oh, what number of Genesis again?
16.
Okay.
Chapter 16, verses 1 through 15. And it's in the chat. You can access that. Yeah.
And it's an eighth Chaim on page 86.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Stuart. That's very helpful.
Thank you so much.
In the future, if we're going to be looking, I'll also try to give you the Eitz Chaim page numbers. Okay, any questions about what we're going to be doing in Chavruta? All right, so I'm going to send you into Chavruta, and we'll take, let's take 15 minutes. And make sure you say hello, read it out loud, and then you should still have time. Yes, Betsy.
So our last time we just read a small amount of text and it took a lot of time. Are you focusing us particularly on the second page where there are highlighted things, or from the beginning of the text?
Yes, thank you for asking that question. The beginning is really introduction, right? That's the whole context. But if you're going to focus on just a little bit of text, I would focus on the last one, because that's when she speaks to God. That's when she calls out to God. She speaks to the angel before, but there's really only one line where she's speaking directly in divine address that wasn't just in reply to a question she's asked. So that's the thing that you should pay most attention to. And the first section, 1 through 7, you really don't need, you can do that very quickly. That's just the background. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? All right, I will be here, and feel free to ask me a question through the computer. I can come to your breakout room if you like. Welcome back. It's a good sign when people hold on into their charutas until the last second. So I'm sorry if you were cut off in the middle of some good conversation. I'd love to hear if people want to share any comments, questions, reflections that came up in your discussions. Please feel free to come off mute and or to post in the chat.
We were very confused.
Yes, excellent.
So we have more questions than understanding at this point, I think.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And the question is around the interchange about URL Roy
Yes.
and what she meant by that.
It's Chaim says that means the God of seeing.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but what does that all mean? I mean,
Why does she say that?
right. And then,
Yeah. And Sandy, I think your confusion is shared in a sense. Why, one of the things that I find interesting is why does the Torah right after that seem to feel like it needs to explain it to us? It seems to in some way share your confusion and want to answer it, right? Because there seems to be something interesting going on there. So your confusion, I think, is apt. Yeah, Linda.
I was with Sandy,
Yeah.
and we went round in circles about this, but I'm now seeing this slightly differently. We didn't have a chance to kind of continue it further. Have I not gone on seeing after he saw me? To me, gives me the idea that maybe she felt confident that with the word of the angel that she would have many offspring and that he would live long and thrive with this new nation, which isn't said, that she takes that message from God to mean, and calling him El Roy, she actually believes what he saw.
Uh-huh.
So she can now take that as a confidence in her life that her son will be a man of great worth, despite
Wonderful.
some of his bad habits.
So the
Wild
seeing,
ass of a man.
right. So the seeing here that the commentator sort of interpolates is that, you know, from being seen, she will continue to act. You know, seeing is sort of like a way of saying be dynamic and proactive and confident and
Confident.
yeah,
That's
wonderful.
what I got from it.
Okay, great. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, other thoughts, questions, reflections? Stuart.
Well, Judah had a pretty good explanation, excuse me, of that. And if I misstate anything, Judah, please correct me. But Judah pointed out that here she is having this one-on-one relationship with a super being, and she still has all of her faculties afterwards. She's intact. She's whole. And, you know, after Sinai, you know, we think of a direct relationship with God as something that's pretty dangerous. You know, everyone else has to stay off the mountain.
That's exactly right. Wonderful, wonderful insight. And this occurs to me too, and I didn't look it up, but my feeling is that somewhere there's an academic, there's a scholar of Bible, who said that this line is an interpolation, right, from the priestly writer, right, for the people who divide up the Torah into different authors, right, that all of a sudden somebody was reading through and with their red pen, they were like, huh, someone just said, maybe they saw God, maybe God saw them. I'm not sure, but that's a red flag for me. I'm going to have to put in a comment there to say, even though she saw God, she still was living, right? Because that concern is the same one that we hear over and over. You can't see me and live, right? Why Moses, who supposedly is the only one to see God face to face, still when Moses asks God, right, after the golden calf and the whole Shuva section there, says, let me see your glory, right? And God says, just my back, right? Whatever that means in God terms, right? So I agree with you. I think that's one way of reading this comment, is sort of like a, whoa, easy, right? We need to make sure here that this theophany, fancy word for seeing God, right, is still within the rules, right? So just even sort of a way of telling us somehow she saw God, but it's okay. She still went on seeing. Yeah, that could definitely be in there. Yes, Sandra. Oh, you need to go off mute.
How's that? Okay, well, I thought God saw her meant that God blessed her with a child. She had Ishmael, because in another context in the Torah, Sarah, when she's visited, God saw her barrenness, and she was given a child. So I thought that was what Hagar was referring to. And then piggyback on what people said with confidence, she's still there and she can go on with her life. And perhaps she's still blessed.
Wonderful. So Sandra's bringing a different way of saying seeing is more active, right? Now, of course, she was already, pregnant when this happens, but that was a way of saying I'm being seen through my fertility. Yeah, Dara.
I brought up that this reminded me of the discussion we had around the extra parts of the Musaf service, and specifically Zichronot, because it was all about God remembering us and us remembering God, that God is remembering us. So sort of just that I went on seeing after God saw me was kind of resonant with me, with that whole idea of remembering God and God remembering us.
Beautiful. And I just want to, I want to capture this idea first for a moment. What does it mean, right? Because several people have talked about this idea of like, seeing is not just a visual act. And it seems here something spiritual happened, being seen as a spiritual act, right? And for a moment, I want to actually stay with this and say that before, even when Hagar speaks about herself, even when the malach, the angel, addresses her, both times you might notice the angel says, she is the slave of Sarah. That's how she's introduced there. And when she responds, the first words out of her mouth are, my mistress Sarah, my master Sarah, right? And all that we've heard of her, we don't hear what she looks like. We don't hear where she comes from. The Midrash takes care of all of these things, of course. But the text is only presenting Hagar similar to the way that women are presented in relationship to the more powerful person, who is usually a man, but in this case is Sarah. Sarah and Hagar are in this relationship where Sarah is only defined in terms of her relationship. Hagar is only defined in terms of her relationship to Sarah, right? This was true for Sarah when she was introduced as Abraham's wife, right? So now something else has been created. And I want to suggest that perhaps when Hagar speaks, maybe she's saying, I've actually been seen as a human being, as someone who's not contingent on my relationship with someone else, as a full human being with, as people noticed, my own destiny, my own possibility, my own future, my own agency, right? And it's because that is recognized that perhaps she's even, maybe that's what makes it possible for her to go back. Because she has been seen and she knows and she has been known as a human with her own integrity. Yeah, Jeannie.
There was one other component of that I noticed, that Hagar is an Egyptian.
Yeah.
And she's living in Canaan and she's not near her people. And right before she calls out to God, it says, he shall dwell alongside all of his kinsmen, talking about her son. And I just thought perhaps that's part of her feeling seen. She's been so isolated, and then her future will be among her own his own people.
Beautiful. And that in some ways, right, corresponds to what I didn't mention, which is what her name actually means, the other, right? The person who's not from here, right? All the ways that she is defined by nothing about her character, right? But by her relationship to the people with whom she is living, right? Until, yes, Ellen. Oh, you need to unmute first.
I just am curious about whether there was a transformation in Hagar, because part of this story gives us a glimpse of where she was before the angel spoke to her, because the Torah tells us she got pregnant and then she began to look down upon Sarai. So I wonder if this exchange with the angel transformed her in some kind of way, that she was able to go back and.
I think it's a fantastic question. And the Torah tells us so little, right? That's what Midrash comes to ask, that same question that you asked. But I think it's a great question. And I think that what I'm hearing in the group is that possibility that maybe somehow this interaction really did change these relationships to a certain point, because we know, right? I gave you the piece that's not actually included in the High Holiday Torah readings. The part that we read is once they're kicked out of the house, right? And Sarah says, gotta get these people out once she has a child, right? And Abraham listens to her voice as God tells him to, right? And so there's a really interesting question here, about justice and what's right. And there's also a really interesting question, I think, about what we see here, which is, at least in the text, given the imagery that the angel speaks to Hagar with, of the, you will have descendants you won't be able to count, right? Doesn't that sound familiar, right? That there's something being set up in parallel in some way, right? And there's some feeling like, no, this is just not your chapter, right? This chapter is going to be, as we know it later was, like expanded in the Quran, right? But this is its own story. You just can't read it because you're a character in a different story. And you think this is, a minor character in service to your major characters. But in their story, they're the major characters and you're the minor character, right? So that's actually a pretty good High Holiday message for all of us, perhaps. Dara, is your hand up? No. Okay. Yeah, Sandy, last comment, and then I'm going to move to hitbodedut. Yeah.
One of the things that came up for Linda raised it, but I agree, is this is very misogynist. When first she says, the angel tells her to go back.
Yeah.
Even before the interchange. And as we know, that's like, if you don't go back into abusive situation.
Yes, thank you for saying so. Yeah, and I bring this up when I said the justice piece, like, this is not good advice for humans to give one another, right? And this is definitely part of a patriarchal system, which really, I mean, look, none of these characters are doing really well in this triangle. Like everybody's, Abraham might be doing the best, right? But he's not in a great position either when he's being forced to send out Hagar and Ishmael. This serves no one, right? And except the larger story, right? But as characters, I think that it's very appropriate that we do feel umbrage, right, for this situation. So I want to use this idea of her calling out to, you are El Roi, right? That's what she says. And I really was thinking about this, about how interesting it was that that's the content of her hitbodedut, if I may, right? Use that freedom to call it that what she is doing is she's creating a name for God. That's what that's the form and the content of her call. And the name that she gives, the God of seeing, right? That later is interpreted as you have seen me, but we can maybe go with that and say, who else but the divine really witnesses everything that happens to us already. And so when we're telling, our prayer, isn't it just allowing witness to what has already been seen? Might that make it easier and give us an opening to know that anything we say, we're just being given the opportunity to be heard here and to be seen and witnessed, and to maybe share, the experience in a new way together. In the text that I gave you, I'm just going to read a bit from Rebbe Nachman in Likutei Maharan, in the collected sayings and teachings of Rebbe Nachman. There is another advantage in expressing yourself to God in your own words. One can recite existing prayers and supplications, but these are already known to the destroyers and maligning forces that lie in wait along the paths of these prayers. They know these paths only too well. So I just find this fascinating, right? There's this idea where you might have thought he was going is, it's good to talk in your own words because those old words, you've said them a million times and, they're like well-worn ruts in the road. But that's not what he's saying. He's saying the forces that are out to stymie your connection with God, they know these prayers already, right? And so they're listening for them. Now, this brings up a whole category of who are these destroyers? What are these demons, right? And let's just say there's a whole spiritual universe. You don't have to imagine like some kind of cartoon in red. But this is, more pointedly, these are the voices that speak to you. Ugh, you've done this 4 times this week. Do you really need to do it a 5th time? These are the voices that say, is anybody listening? These are the voices that are saying, look at that person who's davening on the other Zoom room in there. Look at what a ridiculous davener they are, right? These are the voices that distract you from your prayer, right? And who are just always there nibbling at your spiritual practice, trying to say, no, make a judgment about someone else, get distracted, right? That's what we're talking about. And then he goes on, it's like on a public highway. Murderers and robbers lurk there all the time, waiting for the unwary, because they know the road. But when a person goes on a new path that is as yet unknown, they are not there to ambush him, right? So this is gratefully not our experience of highways right now, right? But you can imagine, right? It's true. Like if someone else knows the road, right, they have an advantage over you. But if you're creating something new, you can't even get tripped up in it because you don't know what you're about to say. That's part of the experience, right? You have to keep your attention and your focus on what you're doing because you're not sure what's coming next, right? Yes, Dara.
I just wanted to say it's like Hagar's answer when the Malach says to her, "Where have you come from and where are you going?" She
Right.
just says, "I'm running away from Sarai." She doesn't say where she's going. She doesn't know.
Exactly.
As Stuart pointed out.
Exactly right. Exactly right. She only is, and that just shows us even more how defined she is from where she's been. She only knows she's escaping. And that might be similar to hitbodedut. We don't really know where we're going with this. We just know where we're coming from. And we're trying to make a line of address, a new path. So he finally says, similarly, when you talk to God in your own words, this is a new pathway, like a new name for God. An original prayer that springs directly from your heart. Accordingly, the maligning forces are not lying there in wait. Even so, you should also recite psalms and other supplications as well as your personal prayers, right? Again, he's not saying these other things are bad. There's purpose for all of them, but there's purpose in creating your own path. And I guess in the last, again, I'm just going to take one more minute. Maybe as an inspiration for beginning our hitbodedut, we can try to think of the name that we actually want to use for God to address God. That can be the beginning of our new path. And it can be an obstacle in itself. So if you're not, don't write down, you can talk it out. I think it might be this, but maybe it should be this, but this is how I feel about it. That can actually be a pathway into who am I talking to? And what is happening as I'm doing this, right? It can be a path of reflection in itself. All right, so feel free to email me with questions. I'm putting my email in the chat. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more questions at the end, but I do want to close with a prayer as Rebbe Nachman teaches from our learning. So one word, either about something you experienced today, one word about something you could really use, or one word about something you'd like to offer to the group. And I'm just going to call on people as they are in the order of my screen, and you're going to pop around. So I may say your name twice or forget to say your name, and please just help me. And feel free to pass as well. All right, Arlette.
Joy.
Stuart.
Hagar.
Linda.
Elroy, good name.
Susan. Susan, you need to unmute. Thank you. Unmute, yeah. Go ahead. You're fine now.
I'll pass this time.
Okay. David.
New name.
Catherine.
Context.
Ellen.
Connection.
Betsy.
Be seen.
Judah.
Equilibrium.
Sandra.
Courage.
Dara.
Motivation.
Miriam.
I think I got it.
Ruth.
Being seen.
Sandy.
Hagar.
Jeannie.
Bird song. as I'm hearing them out my window.
Gail.
Oh, I'll pass. Thank you.
Marcia. Okay, well, we will say,
I'll pass.
okay, we will say Amen, Ken Yaratzon, and I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom. Good practice. Good luck with your experimentation.
Yishar Kohat, Shabbat Shalom.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
Shalom.
you
you.
all. Good Shabbos.
Shabbos.